The Republicans don't care that Trump planned a coup, but do the Democrats? But do the Democrats even care that Trump did? Which I'm pretty sure they do. Thanks to the bombshell documents that the House Oversight and Reform Committee had released just ahead of Tuesday's hearing on the January 6th insurrection, Americans Americans have a clear and unmistakable view of just how far a former squatter, Donald Trump, went into trying to corrupt our democratic institutions, engage in a violent coup, and overturn our free and fair election. These documents show that the squatter Trump tried to corrupt our nation's chief law enforcement agency in a brazen attempt to overturn an election that he lost, said the Democratic Committee chairwoman Carolyn Maloney. And she's absolutely correct. I would um, I would add one simple edit. It's Trump and the GOP. He attempted a coup, and yes, we should all use the word, and he's still trying with ample help from the Republicans. Now, if you consider that hyperbole, I direct you to those bombshell documents revealing how the Trump administration, including the Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, attempted to pressure the Department of Justice to advance dangerous conspiracy theories of election fraud and influence courts to nullify the election results so that Trump could stay in power. An hour before announcing his Attorney General, Fat Fuck Barr, would be stepping down, no doubt because he refused to promote the big lie, Trump's assistant sent an email to Jeffrey Rosen, his incoming Attorney General, showing evidence of alleged election fraud in northern Michigan and talking points to advance that lie. 2 weeks later, Trump's White House sent a draft brief to Rosen for the DOJ to submit to the Supreme Court, intending to effectively nullify the 2020 election and help Trump usurp that power. Transcribed interviews with former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows reveal that he directly pressured the DOJ officials at least 5 different times to investigate batshit conspiracy theories, including one suggesting that satellite technology from Europe was used to tamper with the U.S. voting equipment, which is full of shit. But it appears that Rosen and other senior members of the DOJ were not willing to pledge allegiance to Trump over the United States, but pure insanity is how Rosen and Richard Donahue, who was the acting Deputy Attorney General, described Meadows' emails. Trump then considered replacing Rosen with the sympathetic sycophant Jeffrey Clark, who was then acting head of the civil division, to continue influencing the DOJ to help him succeed in his criminal authoritarian coup. These revelations, which are shocking and should be thoroughly investigated, come on the heels of the equally jaw-dropping but totally usurping news, or unsurprising news, that the Justice Department, acting as Trump's Luca Brasi, decided to retaliate against Democrats in the media. Specifically, prosecutors subpoenaed Apple for phone records of the Democratic representatives Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell and their aides and family members, including a minor. The media outlets from the Justice Department also sought to retaliate against reporters and the media outlets for leaks and attempted to seize thousands of emails and phone records of news outlets and reporters. And if this sounds like the thuggish tactics used by strongmen and corrupt rulers and authoritarian regimes, well, it is. And let's not forget Trump continues to praise Putin and was friendly with Hungary's Orban, who was Trump before Trump, Brazil's Bolsonaro, Turkey's Erdogan, Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman, Israel's Netanyahu, who's desperately copying Trump's tactics to remain relevant, Egypt's Sisi, and the Philippines' Duterte. But none of them are particularly celebrated as champions of human rights, but the free press and independent judiciary are the small inconvenience known as a democracy by and for the people. Thankfully, Trump lost in his efforts to erase his loss fell short, but his corrupting presence has contaminated not only the GOP, but also the Department of Justice and law enforcement. We still don't know the extent of how Trump and his allies pressured, corrupted, and manipulated our democratic institutions from within to advance their perverse schemes for power and profit. But what I do know after watching this hearing is that January 6th is simply a sneak preview. The GOP and its right-wing allies in Congress, law enforcement, and conservative media are going to attempt another coup when they lose another election. At Tuesday's hearing, the committee wanted to investigate why it took the National Guard nearly 4 hours to respond to the U.S. Capitol breach anyway, even though top officials at the Defense Department received 12 urgent requests for help from the Capitol Police Chief and Mayor. And meanwhile, Army leaders told the National Guard to stand by 5 times even as violence escalated, which eventually claimed 5 lives. Pipe bombs were also found near the U.S. Capitol, and some of the protesters came with weapons intending to assassinate the Vice President Mike Pence and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. We also know that officers are being investigated for their alleged role in this insurrection, and that white supremacist groups that were sympathetic to Trump and the GOP have tried to infiltrate the law enforcement agencies across the country. But the committee had the opportunity to question FBI Director Christopher Wray, General Charles Flynn, the brother of Michael Flynn, who was Trump's disgraced national security advisor and is a big prominent promoter of both the QAnon conspiracy theory and the Big Lie, and Lieutenant General Walter Piatt, director of the Army staff. It was revealed that General Charles Flynn and General Piatt were both involved in a phone call with Army leaders. We're worried about the optics of sending in the National Guard, and that's the same National Guard that quickly responded with massive force to the peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters, include others out of Lafayette Square, with tear gas and violence last summer. But no such concerns of optics were pressed then. One would assume that the Republicans who were allegedly so committed to law and order and national security that they held hearings on Benghazi and Clinton's emails for years, and they have focused on Antifa as a fake terrorist threat, would take the opportunity to dig deep into this massive failure of intelligence and law enforcement that allowed hundreds of armed violent insurrectionists to take over the U.S. Capitol for the first time in 200 years. Or they could ask the FBI Director Wray to do more to investigate and prosecute members of armed militias and the white supremacist groups. Some of them participated in the violent insurrection and are also the #1 domestic terror threat in America. But nope, instead, they used their time to bitch and whine, deflect, and obstruct. They performed for their base and said that the House should be spending its time and powers to investigate Dr. Fauci's emails, the Wuhan lab theory, the border crisis, the threat of inflation, and Biden's economic policies. They also found time to bitch about masking policies at the U.S. Capitol and to urge Americans to move on from the insurrection that the Republicans Americans had tried to move on from the insurrection that Republicans Representative Clyde recently referred to as a normal tourist visit, which it wasn't. Now, if you were the party that was actively aiding and abetting a violent insurrection, you would want to move on as well. It was a grotesque spectacle seeing Representative Paul Gosar basically grill Wray on who executed Ashley Babbitt and suggesting without evidence that the officer who shot her was hiding and waiting to kill her. And Gosar didn't spend time worrying about Officer Sicknick, who died trying to protect his colleagues from Babbitt and the violent mob. No, neither did 21 Republicans in the House, who just opposed a bill to award Congressional Gold Medals for Capitol Police and officers who defended them against the violent mob during the January 6th insurrection. But like some other House Republicans, Gosar actively supports white supremacist conspiracy theories. He has ties to armed militia movements and cheered on many of the events of January 6th. And Ray said that the FBI has arrested 500 people so far and is currently overseeing hundreds of investigations. Now, hold on. Like some other House Republicans, Gosar actively. Okay, no, never mind. But basically, they would start talking by talking to some Republicans like Gosar, as members of his party have blocked a bipartisan commission to investigate the insurrection and acquitted Trump twice, which he should have been found guilty twice. But he's the only squatter to be impeached twice anyway. And with the majority of them even voting to cancel the election, their conservative media ecosystem is actively gaslighting America and their base with dangerous conspiracy theories, as the majority of Republicans believe the big lie that Biden lost the 2020 election, which he didn't. Thankfully, Democrats are in power. However, they retain a slim majority before the 2022 midterms. Um, but they are stacked against them due to GOP gerrymandering and voter suppression. The question is whether this latest revelation of Trump and the GOP's attempt to subvert democracy will force enough Democrats to finally abandon the dangerous illusions of bipartisanship and flex their power to fight for accountability and justice. And one piece of good news is that Pelosi said Tuesday that the House committees will continue the investigations that the Republicans have blocked the Senate commission. As the House Oversight Committee said, it will request Rosen, Meadows, and top Trump officials to appear for interviews in light of the latest revelations. Judging from what we've seen, Republicans won't be forthcoming. If they don't comply, will Democrats finally flex their subpoena power and do a media blitz and unite the messaging that Republicans are actively aiding and abetting the destruction of our democracy? One can only fucking hope. It's time for Democrats to unleash fucking hell, as I've discussed both here and here. Our democracy is fucking worth it. It's time for them to behave like the Republicans and finally bring a bazooka to this knife fight instead of if they forfeit the power and principle for bipartisanship, then they might as well acknowledge that they're actively complicit with a counter-majority and extreme GOP that is actively trying to subvert democracy in front of our eyes.